Wednesday night, a young man attended a Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. After sitting through the Bible study for an hour, he shot and killed 9 individuals. I trust that by now you have heard this story. If not, I encourage you to take some time to catch up on the news. We tried to hold a vigil here on Friday night, and as I prepared for that and kept going over the story of what happened and the lives of the individuals who were murdered, I found myself again and again on the edge of tears. It was late Friday night after Hannah had gone to sleep. Mindy and I were catching up on some of the responses to those events in order to remember some other events that were quite similar. We visited the History Channel, watched the story of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham from nearly 50 years ago. As we heard the story of the deaths of Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, Denise McNair, the strain of staring into the abyss of depraved violence and the nexus of racism caught up with me. I was able to just cry. As I thought about all of this on Saturday morning and came back to writing this sermon, I found myself returning to a philosopher that it was my privilege to get to know at one point in my life. His name was David Michael Levin. He taught at the University of Northwestern. The seminary I attended is on the campus of Northwestern, and we lived in its shadow. Levin has thought a lot about vision. What does it mean to see? Why do we say that we think in terms of sight? Among his most influential books that I have ever read was his book on the opening of vision. Now, don't worry. I'm not going to summarize the book for you or give you a lecture on its salient points. I can promise you that if you take time to read it, you will be well rewarded. What I found myself coming back to Saturday morning, long after the tears had dried and my body had ceased convulsing, was Levin's insight that vision begins only when we cry. Only when the historical need, the historical reality tears at our eyes until we cry, do we see. Crying is the root of human vision. This suggests that compassion, the capacity to feel what others are feeling and take their suffering to heart, is an essential factor in the fulfillment of our vision. A fulfillment already manifest in our own capacity to be so moved by what we see that we break down and cry. The medium of crying is water. Principle of continuity, cohesion, and change. When the heart opens, the being of vision is effectively rooted. Rooted, if we may rely here on some words from Emerson's Grenade, in waters with tears of ancient sorrow. According to the depth of feeling in which our vision is rooted, the depth of awareness from which our vision is drawn, such is the extent of our capacity to see with eyes of compassion and make visible in the world of the living what those eyes see a need to accomplish. This week we have read 3 different texts from our scriptures, and all of them invited us to enter into the storm. They invite us to remember those moments when we have been in the storm. For those of us who don't need to remember, they invite us to look around. gospel, we hear about Jesus quieting a storm. In the letter to the Corinthians, we have a catalog that no one wants to order from. Who wants afflictions, hardships, distresses, beatings, imprisonments, tumults, and so on? Although the psalmist speaks of the Lord as a stronghold in times of trouble, the text asks for the subject to be seen, to be saved. Oh Lord, you are my stronghold, my salvation. See me, save me. Then there is Job. Whereas Jesus quiets the storm in our gospel story, in the midst of the chaos and destruction of Job's life, God shows up and speaks in a storm. Full stop. God shows up in the storm. Spend the rest of our time here this morning. What do we make of the book of Job? Maybe the better question. What does the book of Job make of us? For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the story, let us review. The story opened with a look into heaven, and God is bragging about Job's faithfulness. Satan suggests that Job's faithfulness may be self-serving, and Job doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds him. So God makes Satan a wager. Job's life is destroyed. His children and their families are killed. His wealth is annihilated. His health disappears. Job is then joined in his despair by three friends: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come and sympathize with him and comfort him. The majority of the book of Job contains the dialogue or symposium between Job and these three friends. We do not have time this morning to review the entire dialogue, but let me give you just a sense of it. Job says that it would be better to die than to live in the world with the kind of suffering that he is facing. Eliphaz speaks first, responds to Job, and says, "Where is it that the innocent perish? Or where are the upright destroyed? According to what I've seen, it's those who plow iniquity and those who sow trouble harvest it." What? There are not enough expletives to respond appropriately to Eliphaz here. The story opened with God and Satan agreeing that Job was innocent and faithful. In light of the events that we have heard about this week, 9 innocent people are murdered in a church for being black. When we read the stories of genocide and Holocaust, when our eyes are brought to tears and we can see the world through compassion, we can respond to Eliphaz. I can respond to Eliphaz, and I can say that I have seen the innocent perish, and I have seen the upright destroyed. In the dialogue, Job 2 refutes Eliphaz. And then Bildad speaks, and Job refutes him, on and round and round. After a while, a young man by the name of Elihu shows up and addresses the 4 men. And then God shows up. That is where we entered the story with our reading this morning. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. When God is done speaking to Job, he tells the friends of Job that his wrath is kindled against them, because you have not spoken of me what is right. And then Job prays for his friends so that God might not smite them. We are told the Lord increased all that Job had twofold. It's a pretty intense story. What kind of story is it? As one commentator put it, the naive view that it is a sober history does not need to be taken seriously. The story is a parable of sorts. Some have thought the story was very similar in shape and form to the ancient Greek dramas. Others thought it was more akin to the epics. In point of fact, there is no single classification appropriate to the literary form of the book of Job. It shares something of the characteristics of all the literary forms that have been ascribed to it. But it is impossible to classify it exclusively as didactic, dramatic, epic, or anything else. The book as a unit is sui generis. No single term or combination of terms is adequate to describe it. Why does that matter? If Job is similar to an ancient epic poem, if it's something like a play, if it's a type of parable, then even if once upon a time there was a guy named Job, you realize this isn't supposed to be the story of his life. You're supposed to read it as a fictional reimagining. Why does that matter? Virginia Woolf once commented in a letter to a friend, God does not come out well in the book of Job. The vision of God in the book of Job is a disturbing one. God enters into a wager with Satan to see whether Job really does fear God or not. God afflicts or allows the Satan to afflict Job with incomprehensible suffering. Then at the end of the book, God shows up in a whirlwind and answers Job. Job cries, I am innocent. And God responds, you are ignorant. The answer seems not only irrelevant, but even unfeeling and heartless. It is as if God appears in a tie-dye t-shirt emblazoned with the words, because I'm God, that's why. We might even imagine on the back of the t-shirt we can see the question, and you are... God does not come out of this book well. Maybe that's why the first and most important move we need to make is to recognize this is history. Play of sorts. It's not the story of Job exactly, and it's not the story of God exactly. The story imagines a very brilliant life at a particular moment in history. The book of Job is a challenge. It was probably meant as a challenge. It challenges us. It makes us and remakes us. It undoes us. It leaves us with questions more than it does with answers. Job is found in our Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, all of which elevate Israel as God's chosen people. In the midst of a religious worldview that believes the Jews are the most holy, Job tells us the story of a man from Uz, a Gentile. The most holy and righteous person in the world, according to Job, when the story is written, is among those who would now be considered Israel's enemies. Who today is an outcast? Who today would we count as our enemy? And in what ways do they reveal what is holy and right and good to us? In the midst of a theological understanding based in a reading of the covenant that says God rewards and blesses those who do good and do right, Job says the right suffer for no good reason. The innocent are slain. Here in our world, we are confronted by those who would again teach us that God blesses those who do good. The book of Job, the letter to the Corinthians, the story of Mother Emanuel AME Church remind us all that choosing to live right may not mean that we get to live without tears. Ultimately, Job challenges everything we thought we knew about God. God does not look good in Job. God comes across as petty and small and downright cruel. The book of Job reminds all of us that whatever we thought we knew, whatever our theological construct we have for God, it is subject to the storm. It is subject to being uprooted. Job challenges us all. The book of Job reminds us that we have not understood God, and we have not understood ourselves and what it means to be human. It asks us to imagine a world that does not revolve around us. We are reminded that we cannot control things by being good. We can do everything right, still end up in the storm. We can do everything right. No one quiets the storm. We may even die in the midst of it. The great question that God's speech out of the whirlwind poses for Job and every other person of integrity is this: can you love what you do not control?